A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
A conversation you may well want to certainly lean into the radio a little closely, especially if you are leading a family, because we'll talk about digital safety for our children, for our families, and how we rethink those things. You'll be able to join us. We'll open our talkback lines shortly on 1-800-316-316. You don't have to wait, though. You can send us a text on 0447 488 316. Back talking digital technologies today and the ways that we need to rethink digital safety for our families. It might be sobering to know that our children may be at heightened risk of digital addiction, leading to depression and anxiety and aggression and social isolation. You probably know someone who suffers from some of the symptoms of those cravings and withdrawal and compulsive use of their digital devices. Well, back today, two special guests joining us, one right now and one very shortly. Brad Huddleston is back with us. He's still in the country, a leading voice on tech addiction, who wrote his first book called Digital Cocaine. His newest book is called Digital Rehab, Learning to Live Again in the Real World. Joining us very shortly, Nigel Dalton, a former Queensland police officer. He was elected as the member for Mackay in last year's Queensland state election. Something special coming up for Monday night. He's hosting an event on Monday night at the Queensland Parliamentary Annex in Brisbane, where Brad Huddleston will speak about digital detox, a night to rethink tech. And wonderful to have Brad joining us now. Brad Huddleston, a special welcome back to 2020.
Neil, thank you so much. I appreciate not only Vision Radio and my relationship with you, but your friendship. Still having fond memories of our time in Washington, D.C. Look forward to catching up with you in the studio in person next week.
I'm sure there'd be a lot of work for you, Brad, if I just told every listener how good a tour guide you are to go through Washington, D.C. You know all the stories, and just wonderful time experiencing that with you and your wonderful wife, Beth. Hey, we've got Nigel Dalton who's going to be joining us shortly. Just to mention Nigel, before he does, you and he have been friends, I guess, maybe for the past decade or so. You've been coming to Australia each year, and Nigel was one of your connections, and a lot of your research has been based by some of the things he's been able to open up through schools and various community organisations. Tell us about your relationship with Nigel.
Sure. Thank you. It's been probably 14 years ago. I was speaking at a Christian college, Mackay Christian College, and word had gotten around what I'm doing with all the tech. And he, at the time, was the sergeant running the crime prevention unit, which they put the cyber issues beneath that. So they were very interested and keen to tackle the bullying and all the things that were going on. And so he came to hear me speak. And when he walked in, he was about 20 minutes late. And I didn't know him. And the first thing I thought, Neil, was, goodness, did I let my visa lapse? Is he going to throw me out of the country? And but it turns out after he heard me speak, we went out for coffee. And he was just so gracious and kind and said, listen, we're singing off the same hymn sheet. And would you like to consider teaming up and doing tours with us? And so they organized for me to come, and for about 3 weeks on average, we'd be in the police car, and they did, the Queensland Police opened up all the schools in the Mackay district to me, or many of them, quite a number of them. And so we'd go from school to school, and while we were there, we were allowed to do research. So this was anonymous research where we were finding out what social media apps they're using. We identified TikTok before it became a thing. And we're warning parents at parent meetings and things like that. So we're able to do surveys, in other words, quantitative surveys to figure out what was going on. And of course, we were running into the suicidal ideation and the self-harm and all of that. So Nigel has been a champion in this area. And the Queensland Police, thanks to them, put me on the map to be able to do this. And so my indebtedness to Nigel and friendship just means the world to me.
And he'll be joining us shortly, but certainly very interesting too, and important that now he's an elected member of the Queensland Parliament and carrying something of what he does with the research that you and he have done together. I'll be very interested to hear some of his thoughts about how things might be working out even in the legislative processes. Hey, let's talk rethinking digital safety because somehow or other, things drip feed through into our understanding, into our family life. I wonder if things, from your perspective, Brad, are dripping through quick enough to actually save our families from some of the devastating effects that come with, the social media invasion and the tsunami of digital information that our children are exposed to. What are your thoughts here?
Well, if I were to be perfectly honest with you, Neil, I'm not a negative person. I think you know that. I'm also a realist, but I also have faith in God. So there's those things going hand in hand. With artificial intelligence now, here, I'm seeing an exacerbation of the things we've been dealing with for years. So we're going in an accelerated direction with AI, which is very disturbing. But Jesus left the 99 to get the one. So we are seeing definite fruit in individual lives as we travel around, as we cast a net. So no, I can't say that it is sifting rapidly, but let me say this about Australia. Australia, on the federal level, is the first government in the world to institute a ban, and that's coming in November for those under the age of 16. And it's because the government cares, and they also are keenly aware of the things that I talk regularly with you on this program and other programs, the mental health crisis. So that's encouraging. Finland and Sweden have both just taken the tech out of their classrooms and put textbooks back in. So you're starting, it's not on a huge level, but you're starting now to see some momentum at the higher levels of government. So I am encouraged, greatly encouraged, but it's not accelerating fast enough to keep up with artificial intelligence. And so that is the current big worry. But then I'll conclude my remarks this way. There is a big God who loves all of us, who keeps me going doing this, even when I don't always see what I would like to see, because the definition of faith is the belief in the thing.
Brad, let me just throw you into the deep end here, because we might be thinking about, what this looks like if you take control of the digital life in our children. Ultimately, as you say, there are countries that are bringing back textbooks. AI is having a huge influence, and, there's all sorts of issues around how you control what happens in essay writing and exams when you're doing higher levels of study, or even lower levels of study. Are we headed for a time, do you think, where some will say it's actually not a backward step to go back to having actual books on actual paper in between a hard cover and writing exams with a pen or a pencil rather than actually typing in all sorts of things and using AI to actually enhance the way we present ourselves? Are we headed for a time where the actual better way to learn might be going back to some of the analog ways we did things before digital?
Well, the good news is, I mentioned Sweden a moment ago. They have spent $100 million on textbooks, printed textbooks. So they're putting their money where their beliefs are. Finland, not all of Finland like Sweden, but Finland in certain communities are doing the exact same thing with their local councils, the way I read that. And then you're definitely seeing a cry in the academic community against the cheating that's going on, where the essays are being written. And this is not just at the lower levels. It's also in the postgraduate. You can have a thesis written for you in 4 minutes and then put it through a plagiarism humanizer checker and get past all the AI plagiarism checkers. And so there is an outcry on multiple levels. So in the Philippines, I just recently saw a report where they took a class outside when it came time for their tests. They gave them pencil and paper and separated their desks several meters apart, and they made them take their tests. In America, they have reinstituted what is called the Blue Book. You probably have something equivalent here in Australia, but basically they have these little notebooks that are formatted for test taking on paper, and they're making many of the students go back to taking their tests on paper. They're throwing a fit, of course, but the sales of those are up, I saw over 30% going back to analog. So there is a movement. There's definitely a movement. AI spawned that. I'm encouraged, the students not so much.
That's right. And, it may be one of those times, if you want the easy degree, passing things using AI, maybe now's the time, because somehow or other someone's going to be reining that in and saying what we really want is to have people who know what they're studying and can connect in the real world, because some of these things that we can generate by way of AI may not actually be helping our understanding and the way we implement those things in our own life and our work. You've been doing your own PhD research, and you're really putting in the hard yards here. But your research is not just from your homeland in the United States, but it's also, as you've said, joining up with Nigel all those years ago here in Australia. So you've got this American and Australian research. Are Americans very different to Australians in the sorts of things that you're researching around the digital world?
Well, Neil, there are some cultural differences when it comes to the internet. We are all connected to the same pipe. So the problems of mental health, academically, all those tend to be nearly identical. So the average age of a video gamer, for example, here in Australia, the Australian Federal Police did a study. It's 34. That's the average age of a video gamer here in Australia. In America, it's 35. So you'll find that when it comes to the tech, it's the same culture there. So the research that I am doing, and for my doctorate, which I'm hoping to defend my dissertation in January, or the very beginning of February, and finally get past that big hump. I'm doing an EDD, which is a Doctor of Education, and my dissertation is in digital rehabilitation. So I've done 2 key studies, one in New York, in upstate New York at a large church, where 77 families, after I did a seminar, wanted to do a detox. And then in Mackay, there was a church, similarly, a pastor led their church through a month-long detox. So I went and collected the data from both of those groups. And I would say, Neil, they were nearly identical in terms of data. So I attribute that to being connected to the same pipe called the internet. There was good news and bad news. The bad news is everyone who did a detox went back. We called it the creep. I've coined a new term. All of the stuff crept back in, and within 3 months, everyone was back to where they were. The good news is some gained more ground than others. The data that has emerged shows that, and this is going to sound strange, those who discovered reading books printed on paper gained the most ground. And I was shocked to learn some research last month that came out that only 16% of Americans now are reading for leisure. And AI, paraphrasing and summarizing everything, is being attributed to a lot of that decline. I don't know about Australia numbers on that, but I'd be willing to bet it's the same here. But in terms of my research on the detox, the 2 countries are identical. There was no difference whatsoever.
Join the conversation. Text 0447 488 316 with a question or comment for today's guest. Text 0447 488 316 to make your voice heard. 2020 on Vision Christian Radio.
Being joined by a second guest in our conversation here, Nigel Dalton, a former Queensland police officer, elected as the member for Mackay in last year's Queensland state election. Nigel Dalton, a special welcome along.
Oh, it's so good to be back in your program, Neil.
We've had you on over the years, time or two, and certainly love talking to Brad about these things. And we've already been talking about you before you've arrived onto the program here, because you've been working with the issues that Brad brings for a long time. And I've been hearing here, arriving in a police car together at a school and ready to talk about digital addiction with students. I mean, that's pretty amazing stuff. And this has been a part of you for a long, long time, well before you decided to stand for political office and were elected last year. Give us a little bit of your history here with Brad.
Okay, with Brad, I suppose it's about, 15 years? We met at Mackay Christian College, where I was the adopter cop, and I heard about some American talking about digital issues, and that's exactly what I was doing in schools, talking about cyber safety, making sure youngsters were being as safe as possible online. So then when I heard what Brad was talking about, I knew the 2 of us could work together, and being both Christians, we formed a team which is basically stuck together, even though he's in one part of the world and we're in another. And we've corresponded regularly. We love catching up for coffee or meals together. And it's been a really great team and a great support from the other side of the world.
You know, I think there'll be listeners who are saying, oh, I wish I had an adopt-a-cop just like you in our community, because your concern for those students, children in primary and in high schools, is just exemplary, and thanks so much for all your great service as a Queensland police officer. Hey, you were elected as the member for Mackay in last year's Queensland state election, and this was something of your campaign base, wasn't it? You campaigned on youth crime and digital safety and community engagement. Those sorts of things are really a part of who you are.
That's right. I mean, thankfully, Mackay had not suffered from the youth crime crisis that the rest of the state had. Maybe it was something to do with the crime prevention coordinator that was involved. I don't know. But getting out into schools and really having a connection with youngsters, I think, is one of the most important things police can do. I wanted to continue doing that as a member of parliament. I didn't want to be that sort of grey-haired bloke who had no idea what the young people were getting up to or how we could assist and help them. Early intervention is so important. And what I was doing within the police was exactly that, was making sure that we got the right tools for youngsters to make the right decisions. And, I really enjoyed working as a police officer in schools and youth groups, but I also enjoyed bringing presenters in who had an expert knowledge in one area, and that was Brad in the cyber safety digital world.
Hey, I'm interested in where the rubber hits the road here, and I'll bring Brad in shortly again too, but as a former police officer, now you're elected in the Queensland State Parliament. People will be reflective of the fact that, in Queensland you've got Premier Crisafulli talking adult time for adult crime, and you're able to reflect on how how you give some attention to issues around digital safety, and it actually may be a very, very significant effect on what happens in crime in the community. You seem to indicate that. Do you think that there is a real connection between safety in the community and how we deal with this as parents, the digital safety of our children?
Well, I think, firstly, from a mental health point of view, the anxiety, the issues that have been well publicised now. Brad was probably sticking his neck out 12 or 15 years ago, but with the mental health issues which we get emanating from social media addiction, from watching YouTube videos, and where our youngsters are basically being able to have a completely unfiltered view of the world, and they can grab hold of a theory, an idea, without having anybody actually analyse that with them, because they've got their phones in their bedrooms. They can do it at night. They can do it when they're dozing during the afternoon. They're able to get information which you and I and Brad, when we were younger, couldn't do that. We had to go to the encyclopedia. It was sitting on a shelf, and we would be able to look up information that way. But nowadays, theories and ideas get into youngsters' minds without any filter, causes anxiety, causes mental health problems. So that's one area where I'm really concerned the overuse of technology leads us. The other side of things is the violence. If you look at most youngsters who are playing video games, there is an element of violence in them all. Some of them are great, high-level, violent, first-shooter type games. And how do you switch off from that reality of playing a game into the world reality immediately afterwards? And I'm sure there is a connection. I'd love to see some research done in the connection between violent games and knife crime, violence in the playground, violence in the home, road rage, all those types of things. There must be a connection. I can't see that there can't be.
There's all sorts of things that sometimes the opponents will always demand particular evidence, and there is research going on, because this is the sort of thing that Brad Huddleston, that you're working on. Brad, have you got any thoughts here? When we talk about children having an unfiltered view of the world, somehow or other as Christian parents, we might be saying we need to take some level of responsibility here for our own children, and maybe to extend some influence into the community. What are your thoughts here about what an unfiltered view of the world does for children?
Well, there is definitely research regarding the correlation between violent video games, first-person shooter games, and youth violence. There was a book written, and the gentleman's name escapes me. He was a colonel in our military, I believe it was our Army at home, and he's a consultant now. And one of the top things in his presentations is video game violence, and he has research, and it's an older book. I mean, it's been out for quite a while. And I don't know how relevant it would be to some of the more modern first-person shooter games, but years ago it was studied, and certainly there is a correlation. And I think for me, what is frustrating is that trying to get the parents involved, like I'm in a school right now, and I've been in schools this week. The parent meetings are the least attended, and Nigel will tell you it's been the most frustrating thing. They'll put us in front of the students, and they need to do that, and we're grateful for the doors that the school's open and these precious principals who put us in front of all these kids. But when we have a voluntary, non-compulsory parent meeting, the average, this week has been 20. And I'm thankful for those 20 who came, but the schools represent far more students than that and families than that. So yes, they do need to take responsibility, but I think, Neil, for me, the reason why they don't take it so seriously is because the average age of a video gamer in Australia is 34. And then in my country, it's 35. So I think the parents are numb. They're just as addicted as the children. The moms are on social media at the same rates as their daughters. And so they're happy for us, I think, to take care of their kids and for us to, teach them. But they are also addicted, which blinds them. Addiction blinds us to these things. So it's frustrating, but we power on, and it's our Christian faith. And I know Nigel would agree with this. It's our Christian faith that keeps us going, because if we went by what we see, we could get discouraged, but we have to believe that the Lord has given us these opportunities. And so we plant seed, we pray for God to water those seed and to fertilize them. But the parents definitely need to step up to the plate, and they're not doing it in the numbers we would like to see, but we're trusting God to increase those numbers.
Before we get into some other dimensions here, let's take some calls from listeners who are waiting patiently. Rowan is in Brisbane. Hello, Rowan. A special welcome along.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. Rowan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. So I work in medical research, and, over the past few years, AI has really, positively helped us to do a lot of research. And I can see, these being implemented in schools everywhere. So, my question, as much as I do not support certain aspects of AI, but as AI becomes more embedded in learning and productivity, so my question is, could the lack of access or use among young children and young adults lead to peer pressure and feeling of inadequacy? So how can we prevent this from negatively impacting their mental health and morale? Because I can see this happening, where, kids use AI to finish an assignment, and if I tell my kid, no AI, you need to go through the books. But yet you see this other child who used AI get much higher marks, and that kind of negatively impacts the child. So that's my question to you
Rowan,
guys.
Great insight here. Let's come to Brad Huddleston, because kids who are doing what their parents are seeing as the right thing and protecting them may actually disadvantage their academic achievement. What are your thoughts here for Rowan?
I had a doctor not long ago asked me to include something that I was telling him. A lot of the doctors who are trained now are obviously using AI. Not that they're not clinically trained or going through the traditional methods of training, but they're verifying before they say surgery. So I was speaking to a surgeon not long ago, and she was very confident. So I'm not saying this to put her down, but she was just saying to me, before I do an operation, I check the diagnosis and the surgical procedure with AI, and then I just gently said, are you aware of AI hallucinations? And she was not aware of it. So I explained to her that the large language models that are being used based on the neural networks are certainly not perfect, and they will often spit out very well-written answers that are totally fabricated and totally made up. And so what I suggested that she do is put 4 different models on the same screen with the ability to enter one single prompt regarding the surgical procedure and the diagnosis to make sure she compares that there's consistency across the models, because you wouldn't want to operate on someone based on just one in case it hallucinates. And so a doctor who knows that the younger doctors in particular who are doing this asked me to include that. So we have the issue of the generative content from AI giving you the wrong information, but it's stated in a very, very intellectual way. That's problem number one. Problem number two, Dr. Jeffrey Hinton, who is the godfather of AI, who got the ball rolling on all of this, has left Google to warn the people of the world of the dangers that he created. And he says that he now regrets most of his life's work because it's out of control. And the reason is because they don't know how this is working. He wrote the original algorithm that caused AI to learn how to train itself. But once it started spitting out all this miraculous stuff, they cannot tell you how it works in your brain and in the AI. There just comes a point when our understanding is limited. So not only do they not always know what goes on in our human brains, they also don't know what's going on in the AI. So those are the two problems that I would say is warning not to put reliance on it, that there's some serious checks and balances on the AI. And then, of course, the children are using generative AI and turning in this content for their studies, not knowing if the information has been hallucinated or whether it's legitimate. And then I was speaking to a neuroscientist not long ago, research neuroscientist, and he and I both were saying there's no way to even know if the original source material in the academic journals, whether they be medical or other, that the researchers have not used generative AI and even cited sources, but we don't know the accuracy of that information. So from an academic and a medical standpoint, those are some of the things that the medical world and the academic world are grappling with.
And no doubt there are going to be challenges, and parents perhaps needing to be aware of the attitudes of our children, our teenagers, our students who are studying, as to how they might be able to interpret if someone is getting better marks and someone is not, and whether they're actually using that AI, because there's obvious, as Brad says, some doubt around even the accuracy of what might be generated in AI. Rowan, thank you so much for your question. 1-800-316-316 to join in our conversation. Let's take another call. Adam is in Marysville in Victoria. Hey, Adam, welcome along.
Hey, Neil.
Good.
Welcome back from your holiday.
Thank you very much, Adam.
I was just wondering from our guest if you've mentioned the violence in movies and books and even video games. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on books and movies and games that have occult undertones and things to them, if you've done any studies into that.
That's an interesting one, Adam. Let's come back to Brad on this, because there's all sorts of ways that people are being influenced by digital content, but movies and music and all sorts of things. You're mentioning Harry Potter there, Adam. All of the other influences like occult in all of that. Thoughts here, Adam? Thoughts for Adam here, Brad?
Sure. The big worry amongst many of us who do this is anime at the moment. Anime is rife with pornography. It is associated with all kinds of immorality and things like that. So the anime is very addictive at all ages. But yes, the anecdotal, and I only have anecdotal on this, students have come to me on a regular basis talking about nightmares. They're having horrible dreams. And the first thing I'll ask them, what are you reading? And most often they're reading the horror genre. And the cure for that's pretty simple. Read something that's positive, such as the Bible. As far as studies go, I'm not sure, other than the usual studies of how the culture is impacting. Biblical worldview rates, for example, because of social media, are down to 4%. Oh, social media plays a big part in that. In other words, they do have a biblical worldview. This comes from Barna, but it's not biblical worldview. And social media is where they're primarily getting their worldview. So there is some research regarding that. But in terms of the movies that was just asked about in the books, I only have anecdotal, but I have quite a bit of that. So I would definitely say the bad dreams, the fear, and the things that the students are experiencing are coming from that.
Adam in Marysville, I'm going to just say thank you very much for asking that question, and clearly demonstrates there's a lot of dimensions to what makes our health mentally good. But Adam, thank you so much for your call. Our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. You can send us a text on 0447 488 316. We've got two guests with us. Brad Huddleston, leading voice on tech addiction. Nigel Dalton's also with us, former Queensland police officer, elected as the member for Mackay in last year's Queensland state election. Let me come back to you here, Nigel, because, you know, now you've got a position of power. You're in government in Queensland. I know there'll be listeners who might be thinking, you know, once you get elected into an office like this, and clearly you're a backbencher for now, but how do you engage with the potential for change as you have this responsibility now?
Well, I think you have to remember what the Lord Jesus said to us is to go out into the world and make disciples. That's the bottom line, is you need to make disciples. And if that's through changes in legislation and so on, but it's all relational. I have a very open mind. I think it's the way that I've probably been brought up, my parents and in policing. I can talk to anybody about anything. And within Parliament, I like to make those relationships with every single member of Parliament, the staff, the canteen people, the cleaners, and that's. I want to shine a light into an area which maybe doesn't have very many bright lights. There are some really good Christians within our Parliament, and it's wonderful to fellowship with them. But I try my best to engage in a positive way with the people that I come across every day. And if that's in the week of sitting in Parliament, those are the parliamentarians. If it's not, it's in my own electorate. And I've only just come from a mobile office. We've been chatting to people in a shopping centre and having a great time with them because I want to be relational with them. I want to show that I'm a person they can approach, they can share their problems with, and then I can take those ideas and problems away and maybe try and sort them out for them. I've actually prayed with people in my office who are Christians because they've got a problem which I know that probably I can't sort out. But we have somebody, our Lord Jesus Christ, who can actually sort these problems out. And the relief that comes once we've prayed is amazing.
I know there'll be a lot of listeners giving thanks to God right now that there is someone like you in the Queensland government. Hey, let me ask you though, Nigel, is there some level of resistance to change that you might be coming up against with the colleagues on your side of the bench? Of course, there's opposition in Queensland, but what sort of resistance have you identified when it comes to these issues around, the digital addiction and the issues we're talking about today?
Well, I must say that the manifesto of the LNP had nothing to do with digital addiction in it. So there was, it is not in anybody's framework as a major issue. We're talking about it today and focusing on it in a big way, and that's right, because there are a few of us who understand how our society is going once we have access, once particularly we have the youngsters have access to digital media, whether it be YouTube or the internet or maybe social media. So we need to be able to move that into each of the areas, whether it be health, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be social housing. All those types of areas have to have a new perspective, and I hope that I go to those ministers with that new perspective, being a Christian and being somebody who understands, particularly on this level, of the digital addiction issues.
Hey, we're taking texts as well, 0447 488 316, a text from Anthony who says, "Hi guys, in relation to age limits," and I guess we're talking about the federal legislation now that's coming into effect in December. I certainly agree, he says, "I was involved at work with a 14-year-old boy who suicided. Due to internet bullying, he was bullied in private at home and could not, in his mind, talk to his parents. Technology can be violent, painful, and unacceptable. Brad Huddleston, let me come back to you because the urgency by which these sorts of issues are now confronting us is very significant when we start to talk about the suicide rate. Suicide, I guess, is the worst thing that can happen through all of the things that we might neglect if we don't take this opportunity as parents. But your thoughts here for Anthony, our listener.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating thing. When I mentioned earlier, and I could see Nigel shaking his head in the affirmative, we have run more parent meetings over 14 years than we could ever hope to remember. And the participation is so low, and we're thankful for all the ones who did come. I don't want to be mad at the ones who did show up, but that's where the problem lies. The one who purchases the phones, the one who has the ultimate power is not the government. The government is there to assist and to hold the arms up of the parents, but the parents have to parent, not be their friends. And so the suicide, if you really want to pin, the blame, if you will, and I don't want to put a bunch of condemnation on people, it really boils down to parenting. There comes a point when you have to recognize my child simply can't handle this and look at the emotional state. So as parents, we're going to intervene, take that phone away, which is really unheard of, but that's what has to happen. And then the parents come in and substitute with a lot of love, with a lot of alternative activities that are upbuilding. Church and youth is certainly one of the things at the top of my list to recommend that they substitute in there. So it is a parenting issue. It's frustrating. We've been tackling that forever. But I'm very thankful for this opportunity in Parliament because, listen, Parliament has to deal with, and Nigel, these guys have to deal with so many issues that are going on in our culture. And we're just at the stage now, I think Nigel would agree, where we're just bringing awareness to this and adding to what the federal government has done. But here we have an opportunity to localize it to the state of Queensland that we all love. And so we're still in the early stages, but it begins with parenting is my simple answer to that question of suicide.
Hey, let me come to the gathering on Monday night in Queensland. We're talking about the Queensland Parliamentary Annex. A night, you'll be the speaker, Brad Huddleston, and this has, of course, been set up here by Nigel Dalton, who is the elected member for Mackay, hosting the event on Monday at the Queensland Parliamentary Annex in Brisbane. Brad speaking on digital detox, a night to rethink tech. There are still some places available here. Let me come to you here, Nigel, because you're obviously seeing the importance of this and bringing this to the attention of fellow parliamentarians, but there's opportunity here for listeners who might be in the southeast Queensland area to be a participant in this, and you're trying to make it as open and as inviting as you can so that people can be exposed to some of these things. Give us your impressions about what you're expecting for this coming Monday night.
Well, following on from what Brad was saying, our major issue is dealing with the adults who have control of these devices, whether it's a parent or a grandparent. And I have seen many parenting meetings here in Mackay where every person comes up to me afterwards and says, there needs to be more people here. So now that I've got a stage which is a little larger than just Mackay, I thought to myself, right, I need to take Brad into the place where we make the rules and regulations. We're not going to change rules and regulations on Monday night, but what we're going to be able to do is give people the opportunity to come to Parliament House, make sure that they are fully aware of the dangers of overuse of technology, and then give them a little bit of hope that they can change that, rehabilitate, and make sure that their families, and in a lot of cases themselves, can actually live life to the full.
Let me come to you, Brad Huddleston, because having this opportunity Monday night at the Parliamentary Annex in Brisbane, you'll be potentially there talking with parliamentarians. There might be all sorts of people from the community, as Nigel says, parents who will come to these sorts of things, shaping the narrative both at home and in school and in your wider community. as parents, we have to take that opportunity every moment we get, don't we? I mean, this is something that falls as a responsibility on each of our shoulders to be able to just raise these things so that at least others who've never heard of this before and might not recognise what sort of risk their children are under, to be able to be more informed about how they make decisions. What are your thoughts here about the way you look to work and change narrative on this whole issue?
If we didn't give hope, we would be doing nothing more than cursing the darkness. But we're not coming to Parliament House to do that. We're coming to turn on a light because we know, Nigel and I know, this is solvable. So, for example, the one study that I always cite every time I speak was done at Wayne State University when they realized that video games are horrible for the brain. A neuroscientist did something very simple. He took a cohort of students, he scanned their brains using MRIs, and they looked terrible. And then he sent them off to summer camp with no technology, no television for 3 weeks. He brought them back in, rescanned their brains, and all of them, at least the ones cited in the study that I saw, had 100% turnaround. They were completely normal again. And we know that's possible. We're just trying to get the word out. So if you're listening, if you're a parent, come. There's hope for you. Plus, we have the add-on. It's not just an add-on, but I mean, we believe that God will also just help you. But just the medical, we know this can be turned around. We just need to get the word out. Now, it's complicated because then you can't go back to the way things were. But with discipline, that can be solved as well. And with Jesus, that can certainly be solved. But there is more hope than we could ever hope to express. We just need people there to show this to them. So educators, please come. Community leaders, please come. We will show you that this is totally reversible.
And those spiritual dimensions that you mentioned, Brad, they're not going to be hidden, are they, on Monday night? You're going to be very open about the power and the influence of Christian faith on the way you address these things?
Of course. I mean, listen, we understand our audience, and we understand that not everyone has a faith-based perspective, and we will deal with it on a medical level, a neuroscience level. But certainly, we are who we are. We wouldn't ask someone to stop being who they are temporarily when they come to Parliament. We don't want them asking us to stop being who we are. We're not here to cram Jesus down anyone's throat. It's an invitation. It's just an offering. But regardless of someone's faith, we're here to serve them. We're here to love them and help them in any way that we certainly can. And I think just that by itself of wanting to serve them shows who Jesus is. We're going to let our light shine, absolutely, for sure.
Well, I want to thank both of you gentlemen, Brad Huddleston, and reminder, Brad wrote the book Digital Cocaine. His newest book is called Digital Rehab, and even demonstrating how that works in that last illustration. 3 weeks separated from your digital devices, and you can come back to the real world. Also, Nigel Dalton, former Queensland police officer, elected as the member for Mackay in last year's Queensland state election. He's hosting the event on Monday night at the Queensland Parliamentary Annex in Brisbane, and Brad's the speaker. The details at bradhuddleston.com. bradhuddleston.com. I want to thank both of you gentlemen. Brad Huddleston, thank you for your insights today.
Oh, thank you, Neil. Thank you for all you're doing for us to get the word out.
And Nigel Dalton, you know what? I think there'll be an awful lot of listeners giving thanks to God for your election in the Queensland Parliament. I want to thank you for sharing your insights with us today on 2020.
Thank you. And I ask all those listeners just to pray for us, please.
Yes.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.